I see dead people. This might be something you'd say if you spent the night in downtown historic Pensacola, Florida. It's definitely something my next guest has said. In fact, she makes a living telling stories of murder and mayhem in the enduring red light district in our tiny town. She's the spooky tours guide for the University of West Florida Historic District and has collected a lot of tales and experienced some paranormal encounters herself. So whether the Blair Witch Project made you a believer or Scooby-Doo taught you it's always a wrongdoing grown-up behind it, you'll love our little chat of storytelling, history, and ghost theory. History buff, storyteller, lover of the macabre, Jessie Drossos.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're excited to be here.
You look super fabulous.
Thank
For those
you.
that are just listening and not watching, she has on, what would you call this century? Is this 1890s?
This is 1890s, yeah, early, yeah. We could be a morning outfit, someone who's been in mourning maybe 6 months because I've got some dark color in it. And then normally I would wear more of a morning hat, but I have my face kind of covered, still halfway. And then I have this lovely necklace that has it's made out of a jewelry. And that's a lot of people would do that. You would take broken jewelry and make something. It has a glass eye in it, and it's
so
my
cool.
late husband's eye. So he's keeping an eye on me.
It's so awesome.
It's my widow.
I didn't know that there was actually attire to outwardly show that you were mourning.
Yes.
Like that was a real thing.
No, that was a real thing. For a year, you would wear. There was you would wear black. And then you would come out of it. You would start to wear a little bit dark colors, but you would be able to do, a little bit less of each. And there would be certain activities that you would not be allowed to do. You wouldn't be able to go to balls, or there was a certain period. Now, I will say that the Civil War changed that some because of, your husband dying or something. Sometimes they speeded it up a little bit, but for the most part, yes, it was always a mourning period of followed.
I would like to have clothing that says, I'm in a bad mood, don't talk to me. And then there's, it signals,
yes.
Hey, be nice to me,
yes.
or don't
it's
talk to me.
It's like the mood ring of the 70s.
Yes, I need
put
mood,
it on, yeah.
whole outfit. But the outfit that I'm wearing, for those also listening, I consulted with the fabulous Shayna Marcy in the UWF Historic Trust, and we went through all of the women's clothing, and I said, you know what, I would like to be a man. So I'm wearing a top hat and a man's vest, but also 1890s-ish, and then a lady's top.
Beautiful.
Just because why not? It's
Yes.
super fun. So I feel like Pensacola has a lot of ghost stories, more than normal. Is that true?
I think because of this, how long it's been around, I think not. And one of the things that my family tolerates is when we go on trips, we always do the ghost stories. So we've done New Orleans, Key West, Boston, Charleston, Savannah, and one of the best is Key West.
Really?
Which was odd, but it was really good. New Orleans is, of course, really great. And I think because we've been here so long, that it's not surprising that there's so many ghosts. And Pensacola's a great place, so why wouldn't you want to stay around?
Oh.
Think about it.
Okay, that's a
Yeah,
perspective I
because
didn't think of.
People think ghosts, they think scary, mean, mad, revenge, but I've got some good ghosts. I've got some great stories where maybe the ghost was like a family member. I mean, they loved him. They loved, who he was. So it's not just always
Poltergeist.
Yes, no.
Yeah, I was definitely in the era of Run to
Yeah.
the light, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Like that was, so I was
Yeah.
afraid. What's your theory on ghosts? Do you have one?
I don't, I think sometimes it depends. It's like sometimes we talk about Indonesia Street. That is we call it Murder Street, because basically from top to bottom there's been death. The three embalmers in the beginning of the turn of the century were all on that street. We had a Spanish prison at one time on that street that we know where a lot of people died. So we call that murder. We do a murder and mayhem tour down there, and it's just everything. It's just families who have had death after death, and it's a really kind of sad, but it's part of the macabre of Pensacola. And I don't know. I don't know whether they're stuck there. The Charbonnet House let me tell you a little, it's on Indonesia Street. And the Charbonnets, I think like they stayed, there's two sisters that we think stayed there. And I think it's because.
You mean stayed like their
stayed
ghosts?
In their home, yes. I think they are still there.
Okay.
And it's because they want to warn other people because they feel like that house is not good for children to grow up in. They feel like it's maybe and so they stayed because of that, because they're trying to protect other people. We have had some people who have brought in Catholic priests and done something maybe to try to release the ghost's soul, but it's hard to say why people stay. And my thing is too, like after Hurricane Ivan, some of our best ghost story places were completely washed away. So then I think what happens if the place you're staying is some of it's due because they were killed there, they died there, and I don't know if they're stuck between elements or if there's something, maybe they're not through having something to say. Or
so again, you kind of tend to lean towards the unfinished business side of the theory.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that Albert Einstein had a theory on ghosts?
No.
Yeah, I wrote it down somewhere here on my notes, but it was a theory. It was called the First Law of Thermodynamics. If energy cannot be created or destroyed but only change form, what then happens to our body's energy when we die? And I think that's a pretty loosely held summary of his theory, but basically like that the energy goes somewhere, which was interesting. So whether it's finished or unfinished, that the energy escapes the physical body, which I don't know. I love all of that stuff. I love the theory behind it and the fringe science that comes along with it. I think it's pretty fascinating. Have you ever taken like scientific instruments or anything with you?
We do have meters, and what they do is they kind of regulate where you get a cold spot or things like that. And the Children's Museum, which was a saloon back in the day, owned by the name is escaping me, that we did that. There was one room that always triggered it, and it was the bedroom where the two of the people had died, and it always was one corner where it would trigger you would get a cold spot, and it would trigger this. You know that ghost hunters came here, and they did that museum, and they did the lighthouse. And so there is a Pensacola group that kind of does that, but I've had some pretty scary experiences on a couple of my tours. So,
like what? I want to hear.
We now do a trolley and we do walk-in tours, but one year we thought it'd be great. We would do a horse-drawn carriage. So we did like a wagon and a horse, and so this was early on in the tours, and of course it's not as crowded downtown. Downtown was not as a lot of people, not of businesses. So we're going down Saragossa Street east, and we kind of go around the corner, and we're coming back on Government. And I'm telling the story of there's a house there, the Donovan Lee house, and it was a lumber baron who lived there, and he had like the best cook in Pensacola, and her chocolate chip cookies were to die for. I mean, everybody loved them. And as I'm telling this story, and it's an open, wagon, and I'm talking about it, I began to smell chocolate chip cookies. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm kind of looking around at everybody going, and they all smelled it though. And the house was completely dark. And I'm not sure, you could smell it though, and it was this nice, warm, fuzzy, it was great. And I was like kind of looking around like very, it gives you a little shiver. Like, okay. And then we were telling another story on Government Street, and it was an empty house. But there was about 10 people, and we were doing, I think it was a Friday the 13th, and I'm telling the story, and I'm standing by two young girls, and they're teens, and as I look over, I see a face in the window. And they saw it too, in fact. And then we look back, and it's gone. And they left the tour. It scared them so bad, they left my tour.
Oh my gosh.
They said it scared them so bad, because nobody was in that house.
Ooh, that gives me
I know.
goosebumps.
So you get that, it's just, it's the feeling too.
What do you think the most haunted place is in Pensacola?
I think Indonesia Street gives you a run for your money.
Wow, really? More
Anywhere,
than the lighthouse?
Yes, yeah. I think downtown, especially to me, if you go toward Alkenes and you're going east, it's dark down there, and it has this feeling that like Indonesia, there's just story after story at a house, and it's like not a forbidding feeling, but an eerie feeling. When we do the trolley tour and we come downtown and we come on Garden Street, we go around St. Michael's Cemetery and we come up Alkenes. And that area always kind of creeps me out just a little bit, even though I love cemeteries. I love cemeteries. But there's just a darkness to that area there. And that's where Sarah, the headless, phantom, we call her. Now, Sarah, and we get a lot of our stuff from reading from newspapers, articles best. And Sarah, throughout 100 years of Pensacola's history, has been spotted. She was a very beautiful, tall, and if you read the papers, and her dad was the Spanish, mayor here. And we're talking late 1800s, and she was kidnapped. They tried to kidnap her, some pirates did, but they ended up cutting her head off. And she's been sighted in a white dress. She always has a big sparkling diamond on that her dad gave her. She's been sighted all in that area. And years after years, people will see her.
So she was killed in the late 1890s, and
Yes.
her ghost has been seen shortly after
Yes.
and since.
Since. Yes.
And it's like there's documentation of that?
in the newspapers, written stories, yes, over and over again.
Have any business owners who have businesses in this downtown area complained about ghost activity?
No, and not that we know of. Now, some people do. We do get permission to talk about the homes, and we have had, when they change ownership, sometimes people pull them out and say, I don't want my home to be on the tour anymore. I don't want you to talk about it. And while we're saddened by that, we understand that some people don't want people to know that. Yeah. But for the most part, a lot of what we get is from confirmation of our stories is from people coming to us and saying, I know that person who you were talking about who grew up there, who saw that, and we get confirmation that way. And people are always very very forthright about, this is what I saw, this is what in fact, one of our best stories is from a ghost tour. We're doing it in front of O'Reilly's. Before it was O'Reilly's, it was a daycare.
Oh, right.
Before that, it was one of those brothels in Pensacola that you don't know much about. It was like...
only in Pensacola would it be a brothel and then a daycare.
Yeah, exactly.
That's normal.
Well, and we had brothels until 1941.
The brothels did not... By 1915, all states had passed laws that banned brothels. To just put that into perspective, they were tolerated in some areas.
They were not only tolerated, but there were specific rules about it. Like if you were one of the prostitutes, let's say about 100 of them when they were really going, the police knew who you were. In fact, even at one time, the health department would come around and do health checks. You were not allowed to cross Government Street. You could not leave the area without written permission from the beat cop on duty.
Interesting.
So if you wanted, there were stories of young boys who would, for $1, maybe take a note to your family or go grocery shopping for you, though there was a fruit stand down here and there were a lot of other things, but no. And the police, for the most part, looked the other way. Until in 1941, the Navy said, look, the Navy kind of said, you got to stop it. And they didn't really go away, but they went away considering, that most of them were open. just kind of for business. They were open all the time. So
in front of O'Reilly's, you were saying...
And that was one of those ones we don't know a lot about. It was like, we think probably people who didn't want their names, so maybe some of the more higher clientele of Pensacola would go into, had like a little door, and you would, open the door and then they'd let you in. But we're telling this story on a Friday the 13th. We do Friday the 13th during the year. And the tour guide's telling her story, and one of the people listening starts to smell really bad cigar smoke, and she kind of starts coughing, she says, because it's so much. And she's kind of looking around going, where is this? And she sees a gentleman standing over toward where the far, that they have the post there. And he's kind of standing, he's smoking a cigar, and he has like a suit kind of out of the 20s, like a zoot suit you would call it. And he has a big broad hat, and he kind of tips it at her like that. And she pokes her daughter to tell her, and when she turns around, he's not there.
What?
Yeah. So we do special tours sometime, and I'm doing a tour for Navy wives of a squadron out of Whiting Field, and this is kind of a bonding thing to them. So there's probably about 20 women, and I'm telling them this story when we began to smell cigar smoke.
What?
Yes. And I mean, literally 2 went east, 2 went west. We looked, we could never find the source of it ever.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm thinking that some of the gentlemen callers are still standing out there, either waiting for their girls.
Okay.
Or maybe they just had such a good time that
they're repeat customers.
Yeah, exactly.
Repeating after death.
Yes.
Well, I polled my Facebook audience about, what local rumors of ghosts that they might want me to ask you about. So I thought I'd just kind of handpick a few.
Okay.
Because you have such a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure it's even hard for you to pick, oh gosh, in a short amount of time, which one do I share? And some of them maybe you don't know anything about, and that's okay too. I had several people, including Christy Bateman, one of my listeners, talk about Ozone Pizza. What's going on at Ozone's?
Well, we don't have a lot of information from that because we've never done a tour that far up. But we do know what we do know about Sacred Heart, because we know it's a hospital. And we know there was a sanitarium, was on the side, kind of, in the side. Now, Ozone would have been back toward in the back, where the morgue would have been. We do know that. Now, one of the things that we've heard from Ozone, these are from employees that work at Ozone, that they'll be closing, and there'll be two or three people cleaning up, and they'll hear their name being whispered. And they'll hear their name, and they'll go in the next room and go, hey, what do you want? And the guy's like, I didn't say anything to you. It's almost like the ghost is playing a trick on them. But that's basically about what we've gotten from Ozone, is when they're closing up, maybe they hear voices.
Okay.
Or maybe
We are about to shoot at Ozone's for a project.
Oh my gosh.
And we were down there, Caleb and I were down there, and he's like, this is creepy. I'm like, that's good.
I mean, you think about it, hospital, a lot of people were born, a lot of people died there, spent their last days there. So it's a beautiful building.
I love it.
Truly interesting.
It's so cool. Yeah. Cindy Godinez said a green ghost at St. Michael's Cemetery.
Okay. I hate to burst your bubble about this one.
Oh, please.
Okay. You have to picture back St. Carlos, where St. Carlos Hotel was. St. Carlos Hotel was where the federal courthouse is, which is on the corner of Garden and Palafox. It was a really prominent, gorgeous hotel. And it had a sign on top of it that was green. And what they figured out, because the cops during the 20s and 30s got a lot of calls about this. And they think it was that light kind of shining off of something, because the police station was right beside that at that time. And so we don't have a lot of ghost stories about St. Michael's. I've heard about the green ghost, but that's kind of how they answered it. Now, whether that's true or not, one of the stories about St. Michael's is there was a man that the workers would see him come off a grave in the mornings and walk up towards Alkanese, and we were like, what was this? And what we figured out was this is a man near Hub Stacy's, a home that kind of looks like a boat. There was a guy that lived in that home with his wife and 3 children, and one of the yellow fevers got his whole family. And so what he did every night is he would go down to the cemetery and sleep on the graves all night, and in the morning he would get up and then go to work.
Oh my God.
And so he did this for years until he finally, of course, rested next to them.
Oh my God.
So I know.
Speaking of Hub Stacy's, that's another one several listeners asked me about. Do you know anything about?
I don't know anything about Hubs.
You've got homework now.
I know. I have to find that out because I was a restaurant before that. So I don't know. I need to find that one. I have to research that one a little bit.
Does Pensacola have any history of more occult activity, voodoo, witchcraft, that sort of thing tied in with the spooky history?
One of the, and I don't have all the specifics because I don't really do, on the tour that we do, we call it Seville, that goes down Government Street. There was a spiritualist, we'll call them, a husband and wife, and they, and I want to say in the 30s said that they could talk to the dead. And probably into the 40s, well, Houdini's wife came to them, and they were well known in the United States about reaching out. And they lived in this home, one of the homes on Government Street. I'm not allowed to say which one. And
which kind of makes it even better. Don't you agree? Because Pensacola, was Tristan de Luna settled here in 1559. So that's when Jessie says old. When you say old, we're talking about old, like first settlement in the United States.
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of wiggle room there for stories to be told, but.
Yeah, and you have to think most people lived downtown then. In the 1700s, 1800s, a lot of people lived downtown. We do a trolley tour up East Hill, North Hill, and that's because in the 1800s, you go into the lumber barons building these beautiful homes up like that. I think some of your listeners wanted to know about the Pensacola Bed and Breakfast. Yes. This is on Spring Street. Now, this was built in 1892 by Captain William Northup. Now, Northup's a family. The family's still here. And he was a captain. He was, E.E. Saunders was his partner. And he lived in the home until 1925, and he died there. And then his son Edwin took it over. And Edwin and his wife Louise, they started the Pensacola Symphony Orchestra. So they had all these musicians would come over, and they had all these lovely musical things going on. And then eventually, the people who own it now bought it in 97 and made it to the Victorian Bed and Breakfast. But they tell us that it wasn't too long after moving in that they could hear beautiful music like they had left the radio on. And they would go downstairs and there would be no radio. Really? In the morning, sometimes they would get up and could smell biscuits and bacon frying, and they would come down and the ovens would be cold. And they also could smell cigar smoke, pipe smoke. And we know that the captain who died in the home loved a pipe. And she says, I smelled it a lot in that house. Now, they have a lot of visitors that come every year, salesmen and people who love staying there. And she told me this great story about Wayland. Now, what they do for their customers is they give them wine every night. So Wayland was going down the stairs to get wine before he went to bed when he saw a beautiful girl coming toward him in a white kind of flowy nightgown with beautiful red hair. They're always redheaded. Sassy. They're the sassy ones. And then he kind of speaks to her, but she doesn't look at him. She just goes into his empty room. He goes and gets his wine, and as he comes back up, he looks kind of in the room, but he doesn't see anything. The door's open, the light's off. So he goes into his room, and the bathroom's in the hallway, so you have to come out. So he comes out to the bathroom, and he's still looking. When he finally goes to the door, and he kind of sees her, and she turns around, the door just shuts in his face. So he's just enamored of this girl. He thinks about her all night long. First morning, in the morning, he comes down to breakfast, and he goes, who is she? Tell me her name. And the couple look at each other. And there's no one staying there but Wayland. So.
Oh my gosh.
And people who have stayed there said they hear things. They hear a lot of music sometimes, like a violin or things. And so I think the Northup family's still there, probably enjoying themselves.
Wow, enjoying themselves.
Yes.
They're not just staying there, they're enjoying themselves.
No. That's why I say they're not always harsh or like scary. Sometimes I think they're They're
just
friendly.
there.
Yeah, they have great memories there, and maybe they can't release them. They can't
That's
release
so
where they are.
interesting.
So
I think I interrupted you in my enthusiasm
sorry.
about how old Pensacola was, about the couple in the 30s who claimed to talk to the dead and Houdini's wife, and you can't say what house.
Yes, we again, because the people live there. You know, people still even though downtown has gotten more commercial, it's still very residential, and so we've always I can't remember. That's not a tour. That's not a story I've done in a long time, and I can't remember the exact particulars of it. But I always thought it was interesting that they lived there for years, and people would come. They got very well known, and that they could speak to the dead. And so there's been stories about maybe they did reach some of the dead, and they're still there and still looking for a way
to they were like summoned there.
Mm-hmm.
This is so fun. I know we are running out of time, but you have some tips to share, but also there was a story about the Kennedy assassination that you wanted to share, and I want to hear.
Okay, on this again is on the corner of Indonesia and Palafox Street, and it's now the court. I mean, it's like a tax collector's office. Okay, but back in 1964, this was a linen company. You know, you would go and you would buy your linens, your sheets, and your towels. And so what happens is on a Sunday morning when they go to open it up, they find a young man dead on the sidewalk in front, and the window, the big glass window, is shattered. Well, it turns out this is H. Thomas Killiams, his name. He's 44. His mom and him live not too far down on Indonesia Street, and he has recently just come home from Orlando, but before that, he lived in Dallas. Now, his wife was a stripper for Jack Ruby, and he was a painter who worked with a gentleman who lived by Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay.
Now, he came home and he told his mom that he couldn't live in Dallas. He was scared. His mom told the police that he was very scared, that people were following him, and he just knew something was wrong. Now, when they found Thomas that Sunday morning, he had a big 4-inch cut on his throat. And what the police decided was that he committed suicide by throwing himself through that plate glass window, cutting his throat. He stood up and stumbled out onto the sidewalk. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know many people who try to commit suicide by throwing themselves through a glass window.
No.
And more interesting is his brother did years saying that he knew his brother had not committed suicide. In fact, 17 people died in the year between the assassination of Kennedy, and they died mysteriously.
Oh, I believe it.
So
I believe it. But to have that connection here to Pensacola
right here.
is so interesting. Oh, I love it. So many stories. I cannot wait to go on the tour again with you, and I know other people that will be so excited. So I'll make sure to link everything in the description. But you have a couple of tips that you'd like to share?
Yes,
I would love to hear these.
Yes, one of the things they say is be aware of your surroundings. You know, when you come downtown, put your phone down and just walk around, and no music playing, just experience, because they feel like there's too much noise in the world. And I think if we were quieter, we might connect more. Then they want to be talked about. They want to be remembered.
They being the dead.
The dead. I mean, and I notice it even on my family. When someone dies, we don't really talk about them. Mm-hmm. They want to be talked about. They want these ghost stories told. They want people to know about their lives, about what they did in Pensacola, and they want to know that. And then, don't be afraid of them. Be curious. Come down. Ask them questions. Find out things, because they're here for a reason, and they want people to acknowledge them. They want to be still part of Pensacola. So
that's amazing. And you had me at be curious.
I think we should be.
I think we should be also curious about things in life and in death, history, and what's happening now. I mean, absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. This was so much fun. And if anybody is visiting Pensacola or lives here and has not yet gone on a spooky tour, you love history and you love history that isn't often told, this is such a good tour. So thank you again, my friend. That's a wrap.
Thank you.